Grazie dello spunto. Sì, sì.
With Ruth Hughes, one of our ILCA founding board members. So we are so excited to have her here. Gabriella is going to tell you a little bit about Ruth and about the talk, but I just want to say, please stick around to the end. And if you don't know about ILCA, my name is Carrie McKinnon. I'm co-founder of the International Language Coaching Association. And you can please pop over to our website, check out our training courses, our members only area, the resources that we have on the website as well. We'll be so happy to see you there. So thank you for coming today. And I'm going to hand it off to my partner, Gabriella Kovacs, who I am very, very thankful for today.
Thank you. Same here. Same here. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Karen. Welcome everyone, and delighted to see so many people interested in Ruth's talk. Ruth is a coach, educator, consultant, and professional speaker. I'm reading all this here. I don't know it by heart. And she's very well versed in coaching psychology, positive education, culture shock, and international student well-being. So that's a huge, big scope that she covers in her professional work. And she worked as a teacher, senior leader, and she's currently working in her company, Curious Human. And she's also part-time panel tutor on the coaching certificate at Cambridge University's Institute of Continuing Education. And I don't know, Ruth, shall I go on? There are so many things here. I can go on for about 10 minutes.
I think that's probably it.
Thank you.
Probably enough at the moment, Gabriella. Thank you so much.
Okay. So thank you very much. We're very excited to hear what you're going to be talking to us about, and it's your second talk actually. There was the I don't know, surprising
international student well-being.
Yes, yeah. I mean, in April you talked about how COVID affects our well-being as educators. As far as I remember, that was kind of the topic that you were talking about, and now you're back again. So welcome. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to you, and wow, I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here as well. And thank you, Gabriella and Carrie, for inviting me back again. So really nice to be here. Talking about some subjects that are really close to my heart, because when we're thinking about mindset, we're thinking about how we interpret the world. And as you mentioned, my passion is cultural transition and understanding how the way that we see the world frames how we communicate. So, and particularly with a teaching focus, having that understanding of different frameworks can be so helpful in motivating and connecting with our students. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite quotes, which is, "The map is not the territory." And this has been attributed to the philosopher Alfred Korzybski. I probably pronounced that wrong. Somebody can correct me, no problem. But also I've heard it attributed to a wide variety of other people, including Noam Chomsky, including Carl Rogers. And it's something I say a lot, so maybe it will be attributed to me. So I thought I'd start just with what do I mean by that? The map is not the territory. It seems obvious, and yet, because we use the maps that we have created to interpret the world around us every day, we think that's the way the world works. We think that is the world, but it isn't. I mean, we are these creatures existing in, and the input that comes in, the light patterns, the sound, when we're babies, we don't know what any of it means. And we start to interpret it. And those around us, as we learn to communicate, interpret us for us. So we start to get the culture, get the beliefs, get the values, and they go so deep inside us. If you look at systematic coaching, we are part of the systems that we belong to. And our very first system is the family, and then the organizations around us, maybe our school, maybe our religious communities, maybe our social communities, and then our workplace later on. And we think that is the world. But actually, you know, if I say I want a map of Sydney, Australia, all of these maps here are that thing. They are maps of Sydney, Australia. And yet they're so different, aren't they? They're completely different interpretations. One of them is a sea map, one of them is a city map, one of them is a contour map, one of them is a regional map. And you might think, what on earth is she doing talking about maps when we're thinking about teaching, we're thinking about coaching, and we're thinking about mindset? I hope it will become clearer, and that during the course of today's talk, you might become more aware of your own mindset in certain areas. I'm going to look at a couple of particular models, and also you might be able to help your students understand theirs and as such learn more effectively. I'm going to share one of my favorite quotes. It was I can't remember the original person who said it, but my tutor, when I did my master's in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology, used to say to me, you know, no model is accurate, all models are wrong, but some of them can be useful. And so today I thought I would share a couple of models that I have found incredibly useful, both as an educator and as a human being. First of all, we're going to talk about why. So you can't learn unless you feel safe. Timothy R. Clark came up with 4 stages of psychological safety, and you might relate this to your students in the classroom. First of all, they have to feel safe to be included, to be part of the group, to be there, to be in the space, whether that space is a physical space or whether it's an online learning space. And then secondly, they have to feel safe in order to learn. So to sit there, to start to take information, to start to understand what's going on. And then safe to contribute, to start to volunteer, to join in that stage of learning. And then finally, safe to challenge. Creating an environment where you can question and where you can engage. And it isn't straightforward, particularly with language teaching, because we have all kinds of cultural assumptions going on underneath, whether it's polite in the culture of your student to say anything that challenges the hierarchy of the teacher. When you have a teacher who invites first name use and a student feels that that's extremely disrespectful, you've got all of these things going on in language classrooms that make people feel more or less safe, and you've got groups of people who feel more or less safe with one another. Some students don't feel safe in mixed gender classrooms. So that there's all sorts of different layers of safety that you have to overcome before you even get to the safety in learning layers. But these are something we all need to be aware of. So this is a model, in fact, I shared the last time that I spoke, when I was talking about the impact of COVID and the impact of change that we were all undergoing at that time, and how that exacerbates a feeling of insecurity that can happen with culture shock with young people or older people. It doesn't have to be young people. So this model is one of my favorite psychological models, Rock's 2008 SCARF model. And he argues convincingly, looking at the neuroscience, that we have 5 pillars of our identity that are central to us: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And when those things are impacted adversely, it activates the limbic system. So our amygdala, and just to simplify, not going, our reptilian brain, which is our threat response, fight, flight, and fright, freeze, and submission, our responses. That's the oldest part of our brain. And then when that activates, our neocortex, which is the front part of our brain, which is where our thinking, our learning, our creativity takes place, can't be accessed because we are working to redress the things that are threatening us. So you, I'm sure, as language teachers will have seen that, but also you'll feel it yourself when something isn't fair, when you're feeling that people aren't relating to you, aren't interested in your well-being, when you can't behave autonomously, you have no control over what's happening, when you don't know what's happening, you're uncertain of what's going on, and when you feel your status is being adversely impacted, it can have a really negative impact on your learning. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far ahead. And then the neocortex at the front, the prefrontal cortex. Conversely, if you boost status, if you boost someone's sense of certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness, then the hormones that are released have got their receptors in the neocortex, so oxytocin, serotonin, and the positive hormones, and that boosts your ability to learn. So as educators, the first thing we need to do is make our classrooms safe spaces to learn. And thinking about how do we do that? How can we help influence mindsets, particularly mindsets that are so impacted by cultural frames of reference that are beyond our control as educators? Well, one way is to actually become meta in our thinking, step out of how we respond every day as educators, as human beings, and think about what our mindset actually is. And to start with this, I would like you to consider this scenario. I'm going to tell you, you have won the lottery. Fantastic, congratulations. And I want you to think, in terms of your response to that piece of news, how do you feel? What came into your mind straight away? And if any of you would be prepared to share that, you know, whether something came in that kind of went, yeah, right, that's never going to happen to me, or whether something came into your mind, fantastic, no more money worries, that's great. Could you post in the chat, what was your response to that piece of great news? How did you think about it? Okay. Somebody's excited.
Okay, shall I be reading them out?
Yeah, thanks, Gabriella.
Okay, so Peter says, money doesn't give you happiness. Judy said, excited. Rita said, freedom. Sabrina said, yes, happy and excited. I'd sign up for a couple of courses, pay my mortgage. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to share? No.
Okay, so some mix. So there's a comment that shows a little bit of caution, and then some happy and positive responses. Wow, now what? Brilliant. And then the next one. So I'd like you to think, you've just arrived on holiday, and when you arrive at your holiday destination, you look out of the window and this is what you see. What's your response to looking out of the window at your beautiful holiday destination? I know at the moment it would be fantastic, you know, anybody who's able to travel with COVID would be glad. Peter's response, just the same, holidays don't guarantee you happiness. So I've got a rut roll and a crap, and it's beautiful anyway. Awesome nature. Change gears, it's going to be different than I thought. So there's a variety of responses. Tomorrow's another day. Okay, this is how it is for now, but there's a chance of things improving tomorrow. It's interesting. Our genetic predisposition to optimism or to pessimism, according to the research that's been done by Martin Seligman, is pretty fixed. It's not something that we can help. Most of us, it's about 60% of us are genetically predisposed to pessimism. And there's a really good reason for that, because historically, at a time when danger from animals, for example, was far more serious than it is at the moment, if you went past a cave and you thought, oh, that looks dangerous, maybe there's something in there, I'm going to keep away. Or if you thought, oh, there's a beautiful flower in front of that cave, that's lovely, and you go skipping towards it, the people who were more likely to survive were the ones that were suspicious, because they were less likely perhaps to be killed by a bear or a lion or any of the creatures that may have been living inside the cave. So there is some genetic reasons why we could be optimistic or pessimistic, but actually in today's life, pessimism can get in the way. It can cause us some issues. So I'm going to show you now from the work of Martin Seligman in positive psychology. This is extracted from some of the findings of the Penn Resilience Program. If you want to look it up, the lead author Shatter in 1997 identified the characteristics of optimistic and pessimistic thinking styles. So when good things happen, when you win the lottery, when something great takes place in your life, if you have an optimistic thinking style, you tend to respond to those things by thinking, okay, this is permanent. This is, wow, what next? Well, my whole life is going to be brilliant from now on. That's your immediate response to a good thing. And it applies to everything. So you'll know this as educators with young people. If they have a bad day, the kind of young person who, my life is at an end. I used to do an evaluation sheet. I worked as a teacher for more than 30 years and had a weekly evaluation sheet that my boarding students completed. And some of them, if they had a friendship, they'd color in friendship red, but the whole week would be red. So friendship and work and activities and everything. So it becomes a global thought. And then also, I'm such a lucky person. If you had that response, I've won the lottery. Yay, I'm such a lucky person. It's kind of down to me. I bring my luck with me. That's an optimistic thinking style. Whereas pessimistic thinking styles are, it's temporary and won't last. If you got the lottery message and you went, yeah, right, that's not going to happen to me. If it does, I've only won €5. Or if something good happens, you think there's a specific reason for it and that can't be repeated. Or you think, well, it's happened, but it's completely random. It's nothing to do with me. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that normally happens to, so it won't make any difference. My life will, money can't buy you happiness. So I'm not going to be any happier now that I've got all this money than I was before. Might be your mindset. So have a little think, which is you? When something good happens, is your mindset tending towards the optimistic or the pessimistic? And can I stress again, this isn't good or bad. It's not like, oh, you have to have an optimistic mindset. In fact, one of my professors, Professor Christian van Neuburg from when I was at UEL, has recently written an article saying that actually optimistic thinking styles in a COVID situation can be detrimental, because you're not necessarily, you're putting yourself more, oh, it'll be fine, I'll go out, I don't need to wear a mask, I don't need to, you can actually not necessarily recognize when and thank you, Judy, when it's appropriate to be pessimistic to keep yourself safe. So it isn't good or bad, but it is a style that impacts how you see life and how things are. And then when bad things happen, if you think the weather is a bad thing, because some people saw the bright side and the beauty in the rain, in the beautiful holiday. But when that happens, and I saw some of these answers coming out in what you were saying, optimistic thinking style, it's temporary, so it'll get better. It's going to be another day tomorrow. That's okay. This won't last long. It's specific, so I can learn from this. This is really beautiful. This what can I see in this? What can I get out of it? And then, well, there's nothing I can do about it. So what can I do to make this holiday as good as it can be, considering the circumstances? Whereas pessimistic thinkers might think, oh, the whole holiday is ruined. It's going to be like this. It's going to rain every day. It's going to be awful. Or this is typical. I booked this holiday in this place. I didn't check the weather forecast. I didn't know that this could happen. This is so typical of me. This is all my fault. And you get those thinking styles. So if we reflect ourselves now on our thinking style, what is the impact of that on our lives? Does it make life better? We've talked about appropriate and inappropriate. Peter, you're absolutely right. There is something about managing expectations. So it isn't just good or just bad, but there is also something about your mindset. And remember, the research suggests that this is something that we are genetically predisposed to do. So it's not our fault either. You know, we either tend to be optimistic thinkers or pessimistic thinkers, and it does tend to run in families as well. It's genetic. But I would imagine also cultural, that we learn perhaps to some extent a mindset from others. And that's the point about this, because what Martin Seligman's research did that was really interesting was to talk about learned optimism. And he himself, he is considered the father of positive psychology. He was the person in 1998 who said, do you know what, psychologists, you've been focusing on what's wrong with people for too long. You need to do some research in what makes people flourish and what makes things work. And we need to start creating interventions that help people feel better and become happier. But he himself had a pessimistic disposition. But being able to recognize an optimistic or a pessimistic thinking style means that you can step out of that emotional response to a situation and you can choose your response depending on what it is you want to achieve. So is your intent, if your intent is to learn and you have a pessimistic thinking style, that, oh, you know, nothing ever goes right for me, is that helpful to your learning objective, or is it not helpful? And if you can explore optimistic and pessimistic thinking styles, you can start to offer learners choices. Because back to the map of the world, there isn't one map. A thinking style is just that, it's a style. And you can say, okay, at the moment I'm adopting my habitual pessimistic thinking style, but it would be more useful for me at the moment to say, okay, let me assume that things are going to get better. Let me assume that I can learn from this. Let me assume that it will help me in my objective if I make that choice. And similarly, if you have, you've got a sunny, optimistic disposition, and yet it may be putting you at risk in a particular given situation, you might think, okay, I know I'm an optimist by nature, but in this circumstance, it would help me to adopt a more pessimistic thinking style in order to achieve my objective. So that's the first model that I wanted to introduce you to. I'm kind of sliding in some extra models on the way as well. And this is one, Tim Galway. Any of you who haven't read The Inner Game of Work, it's fabulous. He started off writing The Inner Game of Tennis way back in the 1970s, but there are some really fantastic learning ideas within the work of Tim Galway. And I'm only sharing one of them with you today as a kind of segue into the next section, which is going to be on Carol Dweck, which is on his concept of self one and self two, this inner voice that we have within ourselves. Self two, he sees as your true self, if you like, the confident person, the person who goes directly to what they want, who thinks about that goal, the person who is fully focused on the present and at ease with themselves. And then surrounding that is your self one, judging, critical, easily distracted, afraid of others' judgments, and concerned with what has happened in the past and what is going to happen in the future. And a lot of his work is about trying to get self one to get out of the way of self two. And this is where these ideas, I think, are particularly relevant with learners, because going back to that idea of psychological safety that we introduced earlier on, you have learners who think, oh, I can't do this before they start, who don't try, who don't think about what they could learn, what they could gain, who think, oh, if I join in, people are going to mock me. Now, people come into our classrooms bringing with them all the baggage of whatever has happened previously in lives. Nobody aims to do badly. We all act well according to the parameters of safety in which we are operating. If we're afraid of being included, we might make ourselves unincludable at the beginning because we're so scared of rejection that we think, let's get the pain over with it before we even start. You know, if we're afraid we're going to fail, let's not even try, because that makes us psychologically unsafe. So I liked the way Tim talks about self one and self two. It's a little bit easier than saying our metacognitive observer, which is the sort of psychological technical name for the voice that's in our head. But we all have a metacognitive observer who comments on what we do. Carol Dweck, I went to see her speak maybe 6 months ago. It's the world before COVID and the world after COVID, isn't it? It was not long in the world before COVID, and she's an amazing human being. She's worked on 20 plus years on developing her growth mindset theories. So I'd like you just to think about these 4 statements and think, where do you sit at achievement? If something goes well for you, do you think it's because you're naturally good at it? That feeling, I love being successful. And underlying that, is there a worry? I don't know what I would do if things went wrong. And then if things do go wrong, is it because you can't do it? And I want you to think about your attitude to maybe the subjects that you were good at school. We work in a society that is so much performance-based rather than engagement-based. So if art wasn't your thing, or sport or maths or English or whatever it was that wasn't your thing, was that because you hadn't learned strategies, or could you just not do it? And do you hate not being able to do something to the extent that you won't try it? And do you think, well, there's no point me trying that because I'm useless at it, nothing seems to help? Or when you do something well, do you think, I've developed? Is it something you've learned to do well? Do you do it naturally well, or do you learn to do it well? Do you love to continue to improve, or do you think once you've got to the point where other people think you're good, that's enough? And when things set you back, do you have strategies to deal with setbacks? Or do you go, oh, this has gone wrong, don't know what to do? And when you can't do something, you can acknowledge the reality, but do you think yet? And do you try to improve? And do you believe that your actions do make a difference? The column on the left is a fixed mindset, and the column on the right is a growth mindset. So I'd like you to think, where are you now, honestly? And is that the same for everything? Because some things I know in my life I have fixed mindsets about, and some things I've got more a growth mindset. And I mean, Carol Dweck argues very much that in terms of learning, a growth mindset is the way to go. And especially that yet. When you have a young person or a new learner, even if they're an older person, and they say, but I just can't do this. If you can, as an educator, encourage that yet, then you can start to make progress. And if you can converse with the metacognitive observer that thinks that they're going to look stupid, if you can make that person feel safe to try, if you can create a culture of psychological safety for your students to perform within and believe that their actions make a difference. I mean, I've had some extraordinary conversations with young people where they've said, oh, it's all right for you, you're just good at it. I say, okay, well, what are you good at? Oh, well, you know, that's not the same. I can't do this. Okay, what can you do? And they might come up with something, like football. So when you were 2 years old, how good were you at football? Well, I could still kick a ball. Okay, what about 6 months old? Were you good at football then? Ah, no, but what do you mean? So somewhere between being 6 months old and now, you learnt to be good at football. You're not just automatically good at football. It's not just magic. It didn't just happen. You actually improved. You actually built on your skills. You actually got there. And that can be a revelation for learners to actually say, okay, I did learn. It isn't just that I was good at it, but it's easier for me. Okay. And we have to say that that is true. Some things some people find easier than others. But when we are blocked by this sense, that person, they're just so amazing. They just can do it. It can feel so disempowering. It can make us feel so unsafe. And so teacher advocates of growth mindset say, don't, whatever you do in classrooms, put up displays of really good work, because those students who are right at the start of their journey think it's impossible, it's out of their reach, they've got this, I just can't do it, I hate being useless, nothing will make a difference, I can't do it. Whereas if you put work in progress, if you can stage it, if you can stagger it, and you can show the work that was a little bit better, and then the work that was a little bit better, we're looking at incremental gains. We're recognizing a growth mindset that everyone who is good at something, anything, was once a helpless baby that couldn't do it at all. And somewhere between then and now, they have developed an ability to do whatever it is they do well. And then you're not, there's no incentive for cheating, because you're not basing your evaluation of success at outcome, at performance, at marks. You're basing it on incremental learning and skill. And therefore, you know, you haven't got that sense of misery when something doesn't go right. Okay. So I'm just putting up Carol Dweck's book, Growth Mindset, Changing the Way You Think to Fulfill Your Potential, in case anybody would like to read a little bit more about this. But think about those two columns. Abilities are fixed, versus abilities are grown. I can't do this versus I can't do this yet. Avoid challenge, seek challenge. Prove what I think is right. Have an argument, have a debate to show that I'm right. Or listening, improve always. Try, listen in order to understand another person's perspective. When your learners hide their mistakes, as opposed to examine their mistakes. Oh, that's interesting. And when back in my teaching days, I would say to my class, a mistake is a gift to the class. What gifts are you going to give to the group today? Because when you can talk about it, it takes away that fear of making a mistake, because actually this is a really good thing. We learn through mistakes, and a mistake that you've made and shared might help somebody else make that improvement a little bit quicker. Excuses for doing things wrong, or seeing things that have gone wrong as an opportunity to do it better. And then that last one, feedback is criticism, as opposed to feedback is advice. Seeking feedback, looking for feedback, creating that culture where your students are asking you to help them through giving them feedback, where they haven't got that fear of judgment, where you've created psychological safety. So mindset can be shaped. And the first step is self-awareness. Think through yourself. At the moment, do you have an optimistic or a pessimistic mind frame as your default? Not good, not bad, just be aware. And at what times would it be helpful to be able to flag that up to yourself? And then the same thing, where are you really fixed mindset and where are you growth mindset? And then I'd like you to think, how is this information and this awareness helpful for your students and for their learning? How could you apply what these concepts that we're talking about now into the language learning classroom? And I said at the beginning, Gabriella, that I didn't think we'd have time for breakout room, but actually I've kind of rattled through that at quite a pace, and I think we do, which I'm quite excited about. So what I'd like to do, if it's possible, to put people into breakout rooms of around 4.
Okay, let me try to create that. Just give me 1 second.
Oh, thank you, Carrie.
End up being like around 5 breakout rooms. It'll be 3
to
4 participants per room.
Perfect, perfect. So I'd like you to think about 2 questions, and I will try to put them in chat. So the first one is, do you relate? How do you relate? You know, do these, hang on, I'm going to write it in there. Do these mindset models resonate with you? And then the second is, how might they be helpful in the language learning classroom with your students? How might they be helpful in the language learning classroom with your students? And I think if we have maybe 6 or 7 minutes, Carrie.
Okay, I'm going to open it up. You'll all get notification. You're being asked to join a breakout room, and then we'll call you back in about 6 minutes.
Brilliant. Thank you.
There we go.
Oh,
you're unmuted, but we can't hear you yet.
We still can't hear you. That's very strange. Yeah, you're not muted, but we can't hear you. Maybe put something in chat because we can't hear you.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back. Oh, and the youngest member of the group.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, Masha, wonderful.
Nice.
It's still awake, yeah.
Brilliant. So welcome back, everybody. I hope that you found your conversations useful and interesting. I'd be really glad to see if any insights you could share in chat. So Carrie and I were having a conversation while you were in the breakout rooms, actually about, do you want to share what you said with me, Carrie, about your revelation?
I thought I was very, woke, growth mindset. I've taught it. I've used it with clients. I've seen the TED Talks and read it, but it wasn't until Ruth posed this concept of applying or evaluating what my mindset is in terms of the positive aspects of myself or my career or my life, and I realized that actually, I think I still have some mindset work to do, that there's definitely still more to do there, because in terms of a positive mindset, it seemed quite fixed actually. So I was really, really appreciative to have that kind of put up to me like that, like a good mirror. So
yeah, and I'd felt the same. I'd always thought I was quite growth mindset, but when I actually went into it, I was thinking, those assumptions that we make. Has anybody got anything that they would care to share in chat about how this might help with students? How could you apply this in the classroom? How would a growth mindset in supporting learners?
Okay,
right. So traditional education is systematically controlling and fixed. Yeah, just
Gil How that
Jill.
is Jill, sorry, Jill, that is exactly what Ruth and I were talking about, that optimistic mindset for negative situations and pessimistic mindset for the positive.
Yeah, it can be contextual. Yeah, Rita, encouraging curiosity, giving choices, really important. And that takes us back to the rock, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness. It is connected with mindset, isn't it? It's, yeah, absolutely, Mohammed. Motivation, because that whole cool thing, well, I'm not going to try because I'm going to fail anyway. Or with a bright student, and I don't know how many of you have had this experience, I'm sure many of you, that somebody won't try because they think if they try and then they fail, it's because they're not clever. But if they don't try and then they fail, it's because they didn't try. So there's that kind of little built-in psychological safety get out of jail free card for a student, that they're afraid about that evaluation. That self too in their head has got that little whispering doubt. What if I fail? What if I don't get this? Better, I mean, they're not actually saying better I don't try, but it can act as a real block. Thanks, Dr. Larissa. It definitely resonates. I have a program, English for Success and Happiness, on mindset growth. Inviting students who say, I don't know, yeah, absolutely. Automatically, before they even start, to give the question some thought, to substitute I know and see if that creates a thinking pattern. There's definitely a language coach at work with those kinds of questions. So before we run out of time, I thought I'd share something that I found quite helpful in encouraging a culture of psychological safety and supporting a growth mindset. If you can set up a culture within your learning environment in terms of whatever your learning task focus is, and get everyone in the group to share one thing they did well that week, one difficulty they learned from, and one challenge for the next week. And obviously you can adjust the time depending on the course that you're teaching on. It could be a day, or it could be a longer period. But getting in that habit that it's normal to share the things that go wrong and what you learn from them. You've got that kind of twin element that you get that culture that it isn't so much the success that we're looking for, but what we learned and how we're evolving, and those incremental gains. There's some great ideas coming out that yes, the teacher needs to become more of a coach, preparing studios for worst case scenarios so that they can plan and expect them. Yeah, maybe look at options, but also think about them as maybe opportunities rather than, oh, if it all goes wrong, well, no, what do we learn from that? And Tim Galway, we talked about the inner game. It started off with tennis. He noticed that the top tennis players were not focusing on the outcome at all. They were focusing on their game. Their aim was to perform better. So if they won, that's a bonus. That's an extra thing. But actually, if your students' focus themselves is to learn 6 pieces of vocabulary and they learn 5, they've still learned 5 pieces of vocabulary. They're happy about that. If it's to get 6 out of 6 in a test, then that feels like a failure. But if it's about learning more pieces of vocabulary, then they've succeeded and they've just got 1 left to do. So it's a different kind of attitude. You know, and yeah, Gabriella as well, what's the sunshine in your week? Having that positive emotion outset, the thing that's going well. And again, little coaching, 1 challenge for next week. And then yeah, recognizing that you have got some students that are anxious, and thinking about the kind of language that you could use to reassure anxious students who aren't trying. You know, this is a safe space to try out an idea, and it's a safe space to get things wrong. We like mistakes because we like to know how we think and how to build on them. It's okay to feel nervous to share. I do too sometimes. You know, I'm here for you. This class is here for you. We're building support. Okay, a few deep breaths together. And then sort of maybe split it off, have it in pairs. Everyone starts somewhere. And especially with that, I can't do this yet, as being really important and significant. How to deal with lack of motivation. How can the model support or stimulate motivation? So Sabrina, what I've been looking at, I hope, is thinking about why do people feel unmotivated? And a lot of that is to do with psychological safety.
Yeah.
Not always and in every case, but it's easier. It feels safer not to try, because if you try and you fail, there's a big psychological thing going on there. You know, so the kind of strategies that I'm talking about are recognizing, so seeing students as the human beings they are, looking at the world from their map of the world. And that's the question I'm asking you. What does their world look like? Why are they unmotivated? Are they unmotivated because they don't trust the group? You know, that coming back to those 4 levels of psychological safety, first of all, to belong. Have you even got there with it? A student who doesn't feel safe to belong to the group is not going to feel motivated to learn, because that level of psychological safety is below it. So the first layer you've got is that building that sense of belonging. And then the second layer, safe to learn. And then the third layer, safe to contribute. And then the 4th layer, safe to challenge, to question. But you've got to start at, I've never forgotten, as a trainee teacher, I was I don't know, 26 years old, and I had a really difficult, really challenging class, and they just wouldn't learn. And I was, they seemed unmotivated. They seemed not to want to do, and I was getting further and further behind with the curriculum that I was teaching. And I spoke to another teacher, and she said, you need to have a circle time with that group, and you need to find out what's their beef with English. Why? What are their challenges? What do they like? What do they not like? You need to get to know those kids properly now. And I said to her, I don't have time for circle time. And she looked at me and she smiled, and she really kindly said, Ruth, you don't have time not to do circle time. And it was such a powerful lesson for me. you know, to stop trying to make them learn and find out what it is that's in the way. What do they want? Where is their heart? And that was the best teaching lesson that I ever had, and actually my first step towards coaching, even though I didn't know it at the time. That thing about trusting the students that you're teaching, trying to understand what their motivation is, and trying to ask them the right questions so that they can see the potential within themselves to improve and progress.
Mm.
Yeah, and Julio, you're right. Everybody's got different problems, but asking them and getting the group to support the group and work out what the motivation is for them, that can be really helpful. And you're right, Peter, about the status, because that comes to the relatedness of the scarf. Status and relatedness, feeling that sense of trust, feeling that they have the power to have the learning journey themselves, and that you trust them to make those decisions. Fantastic. So I think we're out of time. If anybody would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, I think my name, if you search for me, is Ruth Hughes MSc. Some people hadn't found me, but that's my actual linkedin.com/in.ruth-hughes. Or do feel free to email me at office@curioushuman. I also offer some courses in cultural competence, and I'd be really happy to answer any questions that anybody has about anything that's come up for you today. I hope that you found it useful. I've really enjoyed being here today. And I think you'd like this slide up at the end, Gabriella.
Right.
Or Carrie, I don't know who wanted to.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much, Ruth, for this riveting talk, challenging and informative. Thank you for everyone that's come here today. We will post this on our YouTube channel. I already put the link in the chat so you can go to it. It should be up in a few hours after the video processes and whatnot. So if you want to refer back to any of the gems in there, and in the description, we'll put Ruth's contact information so that you can find her from there as well. We're trying to customize our URL. So we need 7 more subscribers. Help us out, guys. Throw us a bone. Subscribe to the channel. Again, this talk was hosted by the International Language Coaching Association. Please do visit our website. I'll drop in here a link. This page will take you straight to our 2021 course roster, which is very rich. We accompany language professionals along their journey to help them enrich their skills in implementing a language coaching approach as they're working with learners. And again, thank you so much, Ruth. And that's it. That's all for today, folks.
Can we do a screenshot with everyone?
Oh yeah, like a selfie?
Yeah, okay.
Let's do a selfie screenshot. Let me grab it. Hold on.
Do that. Yeah.
You win, everybody. If you give me your biggest smiles. One.
To like our YouTube channel.
One, yeah. Okay, done.
And I'm happy to hang on for a minute if anybody had any questions that came up from today.
So I think there's so many questions.
Yeah.
If there's anything you'd like to share here, then we've still got a few minutes if you want to stay on. All right. Any question or just any insight that you'd like to share with us, what you're taking away from today? Yeah. Right.
Guadalupe, if you click on the 3 little buttons by the chat, and then it at the bottom it drops down a menu, and then you can save chat.
Yes. So the 3 dots. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Does anyone want to unmute and share?
Oh, I can say that together with somebody else anyway. I saw Jill also, and also Carrie, right? This being optimistic with bad news and being pessimistic with good news. It's like, what? That was, I'd like to delve into it. I'm trying to understand what's my psychology behind it.
Oh,
It's interesting.
I got something for that.
Uh-huh.
So in really bad news like COVID, you know, it's just clearly bad for everyone, right? But there's always a silver lining. There's always a purpose. You come out the other side and there's been shifts in education, or you found out who your friends were, and somebody said, keep the lesson, you know?
Right.
So if you stand and there's a reason that this is happening and it's important that it's happening, then what is it? And I used to tell my kids, when you know the reason that happened, whether they had a car accident or something that was clearly totally bad, you know, failed a course, something bad, when you know the reason that happened, can you tell me? And they'd say, oh, you know, I had to take the course over and I met this amazing person and we're doing a project, you know. But in that moment, it does occur like a tragedy, not part of a continuum.
Yeah.
Mm.
Another, maybe add to that as well. We with this self 1 and self 2, your metacognitive observer and your judgmentalism, being judging something. Sometimes just that question, is it good or is it bad, can put you in that freeze or fight or flight mindset. Whereas if you ask instead, is it helpful? And then what response would be most helpful? That can move you forward instead of sort of saying, oh, this is terrible. Okay, there's been an accident. What is most helpful now? What is most helpful? What can we learn from response? You know.
Yeah. I think Ruth is
terrible. Is it terrible? What did you learn from failing a test? You know, it's actually quite useful to fail a test because you know that which bits didn't you know, and now you know which bits you didn't know. In terms of perspective, that's quite helpful. So I think sometimes that, not is it good, not is it bad, but what is helpful here can be a really good question when things are difficult.
Yeah, and I think that this whole thing of the topsy-turvy and it's true, this question, is it helpful? To me, the big thing was, and I think this is what Sabrina's saying too, I've never stopped to like critically evaluate the good, right? The bad. And Ruth, you spoke to this a little bit earlier, how it's in a way, it's a self-protection, or it's a psychological like holding space for us to go into. If something bad is happening and you're positive oriented, or you want to be okay, right? So we tend to be like, I got this, it's going to be okay, there's a silver line, all the things. But when something good happens, we don't stop to challenge ourselves and say, you know, and maybe this will, is it just good? Is it helpful? What is it what's the lesson about this? We just take it for, yeah, I'm great at this, or this great thing happened. And
we can also stop. Sorry, somebody's speaking.
There's gratitude too.
Yeah.
You know, just be with it. Something great happened. Yay. That was great.
But that thing, you know, you can think, oh, okay, I won, and then I can stop. And that's the downside of having a fixed mindset in success, is because you're aiming for an outcome and you get that outcome and that's enough. You're not actually aiming for improvement, that incremental gain. And that's quite a difficult thing for, you know, again, you'll find with motivation and students, Sabrina, I don't know, this one, where you've got a bright student who only needs to get a certain percentage in the test. So they just do enough to get that percentage. Then they won't do any more. That's not valuing the learning or the, you know, and that can be really demotivating. I've done enough, it's okay. Whereas if you value the incremental gain and the growth and the challenge, then you go on improving. You don't sit on your laurels at that stage.
Yeah. So something that I know, just to parallel as you were talking, you know, about fixed and growth mindset. And of course, I know that Carol Dweck herself didn't see this as two extremes, right? Am I correct in that? So it's
yeah. And she herself says she has both. And, you know, there are times when a fixed mindset is appropriate as well. Again, not is it good or is it bad, but when is it helpful?
Yeah. And so how I see it is more you're slipping and sliding along a scale. Sometimes
Right.
this, sometimes that, according to, you know, what kind of factors are at play. And the parallel for me was like, it's exactly like teaching coaching. So it's not about which is better or worse, but applying it at the right time. So
Right.
that kind of scale. But maybe there's no connection, but that's just what came to my mind.
No, I think it is connected, and you're right, there is a spectrum. And as I said at the beginning, with the models, there are all models are wrong, but some of them are helpful, and some of them are really helpful. So I was hoping today I shared some of the models that I found really helpful.
Yeah, you started with that concept, so that's a great place to bring us to.
Can I mention
Brilliant.
something?
Sure, Peter.
Yeah, I just think it's a challenge in society in general to kind of have a more friendly learning environment. I think obviously in the institutions and education there are lots of barriers there, but at the same time, when you go out onto the street, gender, for example, men competing against each other, and women as well, but there's a lot of stuff there out there which, like you mentioned at the beginning of your talk, that interference, those messages that we're getting from our family, from the news, from all kinds of influences that really just hold us back and like you say, are more likely maybe to get us to go to that pessimistic mode or to that kind of cautious mode, which doesn't lend to having more of a growth mindset. And I was also going to mention listening is such an important thing that so many young people nowadays don't know how to listen well because they're just constantly jumping between devices and technology, and that is such a key thing as well, I think, to teach or to coach people in active listening and really full of mindfulness. I think that's another thing I'd like to mention.
I really agree with what you're saying, and I think that this sort of constant blasting of information and messages can make things really difficult. But again, focusing on where you want to be and what is helpful. I've seen some real transformations with young people ask that question. So what do you want? Where would you like the outcome to be? And is that behavior, just because someone else has done it, is that behavior helpful to you? That can be a really transformational question, because most of them, they don't want it. They don't want that competitiveness, and the judgment, it produces fear. So even within one classroom, if we can create a safe space where in this classroom, so there are different rules in different spaces, but in this classroom it's safe to talk, safe to be who we are, safe to ask questions, safe to make mistakes. That can be a really great and transformative thing in the lives of some of our students.
Yeah, definitely agree with all that. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've run out of questions.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for going on this journey with us today. And we will see you all out there.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Watch the recording,
Much
watch
appreciated.
other talks. Yeah, and thank you very much. Thank you, Ruth.